Story 1: Night Shift at the Hospital. Picture this: a sprawling, old hospital, the kind with long, echoing corridors and flickering lights that just add to that eerie feeling that gets under your skin. That's where our story unfolds, through the eyes of Sam, a seasoned night shift worker. Sam's got that look about him, you know? The kind that says he's seen a thing or two, but there's a hint of something else there, too. A wariness that wasn't there before he started working in this particular hospital. Now, this isn't your everyday medical facility. This is one of those places that's been around so long it's practically part of the town's DNA. It's got history. And not all of it is good. The kind of place where the walls whisper stories if you listen close enough. It's important to understand that Sam, he's a logical guy, not given to flights of fancy. But even he can't ignore the whispers that circle among the staff about the abandoned wing. It started as a trickle, just a few odd stories here and there, you know? Staff avoided the old wing, talking about cold spots and equipment going haywire, but Sam didn't pay it much mind. Hospitals at night can make anyone's imagination run wild. But what hooked him, what got his attention, was the night he heard a call bell ringing. Sharp, insistent. The catch? It was from the abandoned wing. No patients there haven't been for years. And that, my friends, was just the beginning. Just the first thread of a story that'll have you questioning what's real and what's lurking in the shadows, just out of sight. Sam shook his head the first time he heard the bell. A prank, he thought, or maybe a glitch in the hospital's outdated system. But when he mentioned it offhand during a break, the room went quiet. The older staff exchanged looks, the kind that are heavy with unspoken words. They knew the sound well. It was like a rite of passage for the night crew. They told Sam, "You hear it once, maybe it's a mistake. You hear it twice, it's the wing calling to you." Sam wasn't the superstitious type, but that night, as he walked past the sealed doors of the old wing, he couldn't help but feel a chill that didn't come from the AC. Then it happened again. The call bell. Only this time, Sam was standing right outside the wing. There was no one else around, just him and the sterile, antiseptic smell that didn't quite mask something older. He reported it, of course. Maintenance did a sweep and said everything was in order. But Sam, he had that itch at the back of his skull, you know? The one that tells you something's not right. The third time, it wasn't just a bell. It was a light, flickering under the door of a room that hadn't been used since before Sam had started working there. He watched, rooted to the spot as shadows seemed to dance just beyond the glass panel above the door. Sam was practical, but he wasn't foolish. He didn't go in. But that's when he decided he needed to know more. The history of this place, what had happened in that wing to leave such a mark. He started to look into it, talking to the old-timers and digging through records. The wing had been shut down after a fire, decades back. They rebuilt, but that part of the hospital just never reopened. Always some excuse, funding, practicality, asbestos. But Sam started to wonder if there was more to it than red tape. Sam's curiosity became a kind of obsession. The more he learned, the deeper his fascination grew. It started with the archives, a dusty room in the basement where forgotten files were kept. There, between coffee-stained floor plans and yellowed patient records, Sam found the old logs. Incidents, accidents, too many for it to be normal, even for a hospital. And always, it seemed, they led back to one place, the abandoned wing. He spoke with Janice, the night shift nurse who had been there longer than anyone could remember. Her voice was a low whisper when she spoke of the wing. She'd been there once, back when it was open. "It wasn't just the patients that were sick," she said, her eyes darting away. "The place itself, it was unwell." With a trembling hand, Janice gave Sam an old key. "To understand, you have to see," she told him. Not during the day, when the rest of the world was awake, but at night, when the hospital breathed with a life of its own. Sam waited until the corridors were empty, and the only sounds were the distant beeps of machines and the quiet hum of the air filters. The key turned in the lock with a click that echoed down the long, dark hallway. The door creaked open, protesting its movement after years of disuse. The air was different there, stale and heavy. The dim light from Sam's flashlight cut through the darkness, casting long shadows. As he walked, his steps muffled by the old carpet, he could feel it, that sense of being watched. Rooms that had been left as if someone would return any minute, personal items still gathering dust. It was then, in the pale light of his torch, that he saw the scratches. Not just on one door, but on many. They were deep grooves cutting into the wood as if in desperation. And on the walls, faded by time, were the remnants of words written by shaky hands. They weren't messages of hope but of warning. Sam felt the cold seep through him then, a chill that went deeper than bone. He should have felt alone in that abandoned place, but he didn't. There was a weight in the air, the kind that made it hard to breathe. As he turned to leave, a sound stopped him short, a whisper, so faint he thought he might have imagined it. Except it grew louder, a chorus of voices rising from the silence. Not words, but emotions, pain, fear, madness. He stumbled out of the wing, locking the door behind him. His heart raced, his mind reeling. What had he just experienced? Was it real, or the power of suggestion? Sam needed answers, but he knew one thing for sure. The abandoned wing was not just a relic of the past. It was a living memory, and it was far from harmless. Sam's nights became a surreal blend of dread and duty. Each shift began with the routine of care, but as the hours wore thin, so did the barrier between his rational mind and the whispers of the abandoned wing. The incidents escalated. A rolling gurney in an empty corridor, the fleeting shadow under a door, the relentless feeling of unseen eyes upon him. The nights grew heavier. On a particularly quiet night, a chilling scream shattered the silence. It came from the wing. The sound was so raw, so visceral that it rooted Sam to the spot. The scream turned into a cacophony, a symphony of agony that belonged to no one living. Sam's heart thundered against his ribs, a primal response to fear so intense it was almost palpable. In a desperate attempt to end these occurrences, Sam sought help. He called in a local priest, a man known for his experience with the inexplicable. The priest's visit to the abandoned wing was brief, and he left with a paleness to his skin that hadn't been there before. He offered no comfort, only a warning to stay away. Sam also invested in cameras, setting them up at strategic points. He needed to know he wasn't losing his mind. But when he reviewed the footage, it was either inexplicably corrupted or showed things that made his blood turn cold, shapes that moved with purpose, doors that opened to let in darkness, and always the sensation that something was looking back at him through the lens. The false climaxes came in waves, giving brief moments where Sam believed he might have reached an understanding, a way to cope. He would cleanse the area with sage, salt the thresholds, and recite prayers that he had never known he remembered. And for a night, maybe two, the wing would be quiet. But it was the calm before the storm, the deep breath before the plunge. One evening, he found a photograph that wasn't there before, sepia-toned and frayed at the edges. It was an image of the wing, taken when it was new, the staff standing proudly in front. But there, at a window, was the figure of a woman, her face blurred and indistinct. Sam had seen that face before, he realized, in the shadows and his dreams. She was part of the hospital, part of the wing, and she was not at rest. The realization sent a new kind of terror through Sam. This wasn't just about strange occurrences. It was about the woman, her story untold and her presence undeniable. She was the epicenter of the horrors that plagued the wing, and she had latched onto Sam's awareness of her. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was drawing him in, inviting him to uncover what had been buried in the dark recesses of the wing, and possibly within himself. The deeper Sam delved into the history of the hospital, the closer he came to understanding the root of the haunting. The abandoned wing had once been a vibrant place, filled with the bustle of staff and the hopes of recovery. Yet, its past had a darker chapter, a series of unexplained patient disappearances that were quickly hushed up, buried in bureaucratic red tape. Local archives told tales of a nurse who worked tirelessly during a time when the wing was a quarantine zone for a terrible disease. The records were vague, but whispers in the yellowing pages suggested that she had been a suspect in the disappearances before she vanished without a trace. As Sam pieced together the fragments of the story, the occurrences in the wing took on a new significance. The screams, the shadows, the oppressive atmosphere. It was as if the nurse was reliving her last moments over and over again, trapped in a loop of suspicion and sorrow. On a climactic night, Sam discovered a hidden room in the wing, a forgotten space behind a wall that had been hastily erected. Inside, he found personal effects that had belonged to the nurse, including a diary. The diary revealed the true horror. The nurse had been innocent, framed for the disappearances as part of a cover-up for Inedec. Conditions that led to the patient's deaths. The nurse had taken her own life, consumed by grief and the weight of unjust accusations. Her final entries were a plea for the truth to be revealed, for her name to be cleared, and for the souls of the lost patients to find peace. With the revelation came a sorrowful understanding. The nurse wasn't haunting the wing out of malice. She was seeking justice, her spirit anchored by the need to be heard. The torment wouldn't end until her story was brought to light and the names of the patients were remembered and spoken. Sam knew what he had to do. He compiled the evidence, the diary, and the personal stories. He reached out to descendants of the lost patients, and together, they brought the true story into the public eye. As the narrative unfolded and the nurse's name was cleared, a palpable change occurred in the wing. The air lightened, the shadows receded, and the silence no longer felt oppressive but peaceful, as if a long-held breath had been finally released. With the truth unveiled, Sam felt a weight lift off the hospital, but the final act of this eerie play was yet to unfold. He had expected peace to follow the revelation, but the unrest in the abandoned wing grew into a tangible force, culminating in one unforgettable night that would sear itself into his memory. On the eve of the demolition plan for the old wing, Sam volunteered for one last shift, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't explain. As the clock struck midnight, the usual silence of the wing was shattered by an eruption of ethereal noise, a cacophony of whispers, cries, and desperate calls for help. Steel in his resolve, Sam entered the wing, the air crackling with spectral energy. The dark hallways were illuminated by flickering lights, revealing glimpses of ghostly figures moving with frantic purpose. It was as if time had rewound, the hospital wing alive once more with the patients and the nurse, her spirit a beacon of blinding light in the chaos. Sam, guided by an otherworldly instinct, found himself drawn to the room where he'd found the diary. As he approached, the nurse's apparition became clear, her expression tormented, reliving her final moments. She was not alone. The spirits of the patients she was accused of harming floated around her, trapped in the moment of their untimely deaths. He felt the nurse's gaze pierce through him, her voice a mere whisper but as clear as glass in his mind. "Free them," she implored. "Free us." Understanding the nurse's wishes, Sam spoke aloud, his voice steady amidst the turmoil. "Your names will be remembered," he assured the flickering souls. "Your stories will be told. And you, brave nurse, are not forgotten. You are forgiven." As the words left his lips, a profound stillness settled in the room. One by one, the spirits of the patients began to dissipate, their forms glowing with a serene light before fading entirely. The nurse's spirit lingered, her eyes meeting Sam's with a silent gratitude that transcended the boundaries between life and death. With a final, shuddering breath that seemed to echo through the walls of the wing, the nurse's apparition smiled faintly and dissolved into the air, her essence released from the shackles of the hospital's dark past. The climax of the night had passed, and with it, the spectral presence that had haunted the wing for decades seemed to have found its resolution. The hospital returned to a peace it hadn't known since before the wing's closure, a silent sentinel to the night's profound events. The morning light brought a new day, and with it, the crews began the demolition. As the walls came down, so too did the remnants of the shadows that had lingered. Sam watched from a distance, a silent observer to the end of an era, the conclusion of a ghost story that was as tragic as it was redemptive. In the quiet that dawned after the climax of that fateful night, Sam's role as the silent custodian of the hospital's haunted history came to an end. The next few days were surreal, a stark contrast to the eerie suspense that had shrouded his night shifts. Workers dismantled the old wing piece by piece, unaware of the story that had unfolded within those walls. Sam continued his duties, but the corridors were just corridors now, the rooms simply empty spaces. The tension that had once gripped his spine during those lonely rounds had dissipated, leaving behind a solemn tranquility. He shared his experience with a select few, but words could hardly capture the essence of what had transpired. Some looked at him with skeptical eyes, others with a knowing nod, understanding that some truths of the universe are meant to be felt, not told. As he walked the now quiet floors where the old wing once stood, he could almost hear the faint echo of gratitude from the other side, a whisper in the wind that spoke of rest and peace. The hospital staff reported a lighter atmosphere, a shift in the air that many could sense but none could explain. Sam knew the difference. He had been there. He had seen the transformation from a place of unrest to one of peace. It was as though the hospital itself was breathing easier, its long-held breath finally released. For those who had worked there for years, there was a shared sense of closure. Stories of the haunted wing became just that, stories, tales to be told with a lighter heart, no longer a reality that chilled their bones. Sam's nights were calmer, his sleep no longer disturbed by dreams of the past. The diary, the artifact that had revealed so much, was donated to a local historical society, its pages a testament to a time long gone and to the nurse whose story was now known. And just like that, life at the hospital moved on, the extraordinary woven back into the tapestry of the everyday. But for Sam, the hospital would always be a place where the veil between worlds had thinned, where he had stood at the crossroads of history and mystery, and played a part in setting free the souls of the forgotten. The normalcy that returned to the hospital was a veneer as thin as the walls that separated the world of the living from the whispers of the past. For Sam, each shift was now a silent vigil, an acknowledgement of the untold stories that lingered in the spaces where the abandoned wing once stood. Though the hallways no longer held the shadows of unease, he knew better than to believe the haunting was over. Rumors started to surface among the newer staff members, whispers of odd sensations and glimpses of movement in the periphery of their vision. It was subtle, easily dismissed by the daylight logic, but as the nights drew in, the tales grew in the telling. The hospital's history had become a legend, and legends have a way of keeping the past alive. Sam found himself at a crossroads. The weight of what he knew was a constant companion. To speak of it was to acknowledge it, to give it life, but silence was its form of betrayal. He chose to share his experience with those willing to listen, not as a warning, but as a bridge between what was and what is. The conclusion Sam came to was that some places hold more than memories. They are a reservoir of emotions, of moments in time that resist the march of progress. The old wing was gone, but its essence remained, A reminder that some things cannot be demolished with bulldozers or banished by renovations. As the hospital moved forward, expanding and modernizing, Sam took solace in the thought that he had played his part in acknowledging the past. The nurse's story, once locked in the silent pages of her diary, was now a part of the hospital's lore, her existence remembered, her rest finally earned. The hospital stood, as it always had, a sanctuary of healing, but within its walls was the knowledge that healing sometimes comes from facing the truths that haunt us. And so, the story of the night shift at the hospital would continue, an ever-evolving narrative in the heart of those who walk its halls. Remember the next time you walk the halls of an old building or pass by an abandoned place, think of the stories that might be held within its walls. Story 2: Home Alone Encounter. Picture this: a charming, somewhat aged house on the outskirts of a whisper-quiet town, wrapped in the comforting arms of age-old trees. It's the kind of place that hums with memories, a perfect slice of suburbia. This is where our story unfolds, in the home of the Davis family, an unassuming house with butter yellow siding and a shingled roof that had seen better days. Now, the Davises were your typical family with 2.5 kids, a dog, and a life so routine, you could set your watch by it. There was nothing out of the ordinary about them or their home, at least, that's what they thought. But every home has its secrets, its creaks and groans, and whispers of the past. And this home, it had a voice that was about to make itself heard. It all started on an ordinary weekend. The Davis parents were called away on an emergency business trip. Their eldest, a teenager who was more into screens than sunsets, was away at a friend's house, which left young Lily, just 8 years old, under the watchful eye of Grandma Davis. There's something about being home alone that sharpens the senses and makes you aware of every little sound. And in this home, those sounds were about to tell a story that would leave even the most skeptical with a chilling sense of dread. Grandma Davis was a sprightly lady with an affection for detective novels and a skepticism for the supernatural. She'd often chuckle at the absurdity of ghost stories, stating, "The only spirits I believe in are the ones you find in a liquor cabinet." But that weekend, her disbelief was put to the test. It was the second night, a night where the moon was just a sliver in the sky, and the wind sang through the branches like a forgotten lullaby. Grandma Davis had just tucked Lily into bed, with assurances that the creaks and sighs of the house were just its way of settling in for the night. But sleep was elusive for Lily. Her room felt cavernous, too full of shadows that seemed to creep and dance with a life of their own. That's when it started, the soft murmurs, almost inaudible, like whispers beneath the floorboards or within the walls. Lily thought it must be the wind or maybe her imagination fueled by the ghost stories her brother loved to torment her with. It was only when she saw the soft glow of the security monitor, a screen that showcased the different rooms of the house with their empty stillness, that she noticed the oddity. The screen flickered and there, in the static, she saw her room from the angle of the corner camera, and the shadow of something or someone sitting at the foot of her bed. Frozen in fear, she slowly turned, but there was nothing there. When she looked back at the screen, the shadow was gone. The house settled into silence once more, but for Lily, the feeling of being watched had only just begun. The following morning, Lily's claims were met with rational explanations. Grandma Davis chalked it up to a trick of the light or a glitch in the security system. But Lily couldn't shake the cold dread that had settled in her bones. So that day, with the sunlight bravely warding off the night's memories, they decided to investigate. They scoured the room for any sign of intrusion. The windows remained locked from the inside, and there was no sign of disturbance. The security system logs showed no breach. It was baffling, a puzzle that didn't fit together, much to Grandma Davis's frustration. Determined to answer, they visited Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor with an encyclopedic knowledge of the neighborhood's history. With a wrinkled brow, she recounted tales of the previous occupants, a family much like their own, whose time in the house ended abruptly after a series of unexplained events. The conversation steered towards the possibility of something lingering in the house. Lily hung on to every word, while Grandma Davis listened with a polite yet skeptical ear. They thanked Mrs. Patterson and returned home, armed with more questions than answers. That evening, they reviewed the security footage, frame by frame, scrutinizing the timestamp when the anomaly occurred. There it was again, the unmistakable outline of a figure by Lily's bed. It was there, and then it wasn't like a secret only the house knew and wasn't keen on sharing. Unnerved but undeterred, Grandma Davis set up a camera in Lily's room, promising to get to the bottom of this mystery. The night loomed ahead, a canvas of stars against the dark, an audience to the unfolding drama in the quiet house on Willow Lane. The days that followed turned the house on Willow Lane into a place of whispered secrets and shadowed corners. Lily's room became the epicenter of strange occurrences, books falling off shelves with no one near, toys activating in the dead of night, and the persistent feeling of being watched. Grandma Davis, though she wouldn't admit it, felt the tension in her home tightens like a string ready to snap. She reached out to local experts, a friend of a friend who dealt with unusual occurrences. They walked through the home with devices that hummed and beeped inexplicably in Lily's room but were silent elsewhere. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in strokes of fiery orange and crimson, the inexplicable happened. The camera in Lily's room recorded a chilling scene, the door creaking open on its own, and the curtains fluttering despite the still air. Lily, nestled in her bed, sat up and began conversing with thin air, her little voice steady but her words sending ice down Grandma Davis's spine. It was at that moment that the heart of the matter presented itself. The specialists uncovered a chilling story. Decades ago, a little girl had lived and, sadly, passed away in the house under tragic circumstances. Her presence, it seemed, was woven into the very fabric of the place. Sleep eluded the house that night, and the camera captured it all. The door slamming shut, the sound of soft weeping, and the silhouette of a small figure standing watch over Lily as she slept. Grandma Davis now faced a terrible truth. Their home harbored a history that refused to lay dormant. As she set about securing every window and door each night, a silent prayer escaped her lips, hoping for peace, yet knowing that the night might bring anything but. The false climaxes came and went, days when nothing stirred, and the house seemed as any other. But the pattern was erratic, unpredictable. It was a reprieve, a shallow breath before the plunge. The story of the house began to unfold like a long-forgotten newspaper, yellowed with age and brittle to the touch. Grandma Davis, her skepticism eroded by the relentless tide of inexplicable events, poured through old-town records with the fervor of a woman possessed. She was determined to unearth the truth buried within the walls of her home. Lily, ever the innocent beacon in the darkness, continued to speak of her friend, describing her with a clarity that was both endearing and horrifying. She drew pictures and scribbles that hinted at a past era's attire, a detail no child could invent. Then came the revelation that tied everything to a moment in history, a tale of a family torn apart by illness, their youngest daughter succumbing to a fever that raged through the town. In her room, Lily's room, the child had whispered her last goodbyes. But the real chill came when Lily, holding the hand of the empty air, led Grandma Davis to a loose floorboard beneath the window. With trembling hands, they uncovered a hidden cache of memories, a small, dusty doll, a locket with a faded photograph, and a diary, its entries ending abruptly. The diary spoke of the little girl's loneliness, her longing for a friend. And in that moment, the connection became painfully clear. The girl's spirit lingered, reaching out across the decades for the companionship she had been denied in life. As they absorbed the gravity of their discovery, the house seemed to breathe with them, a wind chime in the silence signaling a presence that was now understood. Grandma Davis held Lily close, the weight of history heavy in her heart. The knowledge of the past didn't bring fear, but a sorrowful acknowledgement of the child who had never truly left. The events that followed, though less menacing, carried the echoes of a time long gone, whispering secrets through the veil that separates now from then. Grandma Davis couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her, the sense that the very air she breathed was thick with unspoken words. One night, as a storm raged outside, she awoke to a symphony of whispers and the chilling sight of every light in the house flickering in a macabre dance. Lily, fearless as always, declared she would talk to the girl, her innocence shielding her from the horror of the situation. Grandma Davis watched, heart pounding, as Lily approached the darkest corner of her room, where the shadows seemed alive, coiling and twisting into shapes that defied the logic of light. Lily spoke gently, her voice a soft beacon in the tumultuous night. "You don't need to be scared or alone anymore," she said. "You can go play outside, in the sunshine." The room fell silent, the atmosphere shifting palpably. The lights steadied, the storm outside quieted, and a sense of peace settled over the house like a protective shroud. In that moment, Grandma Davis witnessed a final act of closure, a release of a spirit bound by loneliness to the mortal realm. The child's presence receded, warmth returning to the air, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the house truly felt empty. They say a child's purity has the power to heal wounds that time cannot touch, and that night, Lily proved those old tales true. As dawn broke, the house seemed just a house, its eerie aura lifted, leaving behind only the tangible and the explainable. But the true horror for Grandma Davis was not the supernatural encounter, but the possibility of Lily facing the same solitude in life that the ghostly girl had suffered in death. It was a silent vow then, that she would fill Lily's days with laughter and companionship, ensuring the shadows of the past would never again touch her future. The light of morning brought a renewed sense of hope, and with it, the courage to embrace the days ahead. In the calm of the morning, with the house basking in sunlight as if to wash away the fears of the night, Grandma Davis and Lily began to pick up the pieces of normalcy. The breakfast table was a quiet affair. The previous night's events hung in the air, unspoken but heavily felt. The security footage that had once held such terror for Grandma Davis now seemed nothing more than benign pixels. She reviewed it again, watching Lily's interaction with space, but this time she saw it through a lens of closure rather than fear. The tapes would be kept, a reminder of the extraordinary events they'd survived, perhaps even to be shared with Lily when she was old enough to understand. In the days that followed, neighbors and friends whom they had alienated with tales of hauntings were now met with warm smiles and no mention of the night terrors that had plagued the home. Skepticism had been replaced with an unspoken understanding that some things are beyond understanding, and peace was a more welcome guest than suspicion. As for Lily, her nights were now uninterrupted by spectral visits. Instead, her sleep was filled with dreams of play and laughter, starkly contrasting with the chilling silence that had once filled her room. It was as though the very essence of the house had been cleansed, purged of its haunting history by the innocence of a child. Grandma Davis, who had once dreaded the fall of night, now found comfort in the evening's embrace, the darkness no longer a canvas for the macabre. She found solace in the knowledge that their uninvited guest had found her way, at last, to whatever lay beyond the veil. This tale, strange and unsettling as it had been, wound down to a gentle close, leaving the living to live and the dead to rest. And in this newfound serenity, life found a way to move forward, ever in the light, away from the shadows of the past. The story had reached its natural end, or so it seemed. And yet, the world is rarely so kind as to close the book so neatly. As the days grew into weeks, the house on Willow Street settled into a rhythm that echoed the mundane. Grandma Davis and Lily returned to their lives with a semblance of normalcy that neither thought possible in the wake of such strangeness. The whispers of the house had faded, and with them, the echoes of the past that had so vehemently made itself known. In the quiet suburb, life blossomed in the mundane activities, the trips to the grocery store, the playdates, the afternoon strolls in the park. The story of the spectral visitor became a distant memory, a chilling tale for a night when the wind howled just right. But shadows lingered in the corners of the house, untouched by the light of day or the warmth of laughter. They held a secret, a truth that not even Grandma Davis's steadfast rationality could dismiss. The presence that had once occupied their home had left something behind, an imprint in the very fabric of the space. Lily, now free from her nocturnal conversations, grew like a flower in spring, unburdened by the weight of unseen eyes. Yet, in her play, she sometimes paused, her gaze drifting to the staircase, to the hallway, to the quiet corners where light seemed reluctant to reach. There was knowledge in her young eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the home's hidden depths. The security cameras, once vigilant sentinels, stood dormant, their watchful eyes no longer necessary. The footage of that fateful weekend was archived, a digital reminder of the thin veil between worlds. And then, on an evening touched by the chill of an approaching storm, the air within the house stirred. A door creaked open, a whisper threaded through the stillness, and a chill settled where none should be. The story, it seemed, was not quite finished. For in the world of the unknown, endings are as elusive as the spirits that dance in the periphery of our vision. And as Grandma Davis tucked Lily into bed, with a kiss on the forehead and a glance at the darkened monitor, she knew deep down that some doors, once opened, are never fully closed. Story 3. Night Shift. Imagine you're walking through the doors of your new job. The scent of polished floors and fresh paint still hangs in the air, the shine of newness not yet dulled by the grind of daily routine. This is where our story begins, within the sleek glass walls of the Larchmont building, standing like a sentinel over downtown's busy streets. It's the kind of place that prides itself on security, with cameras peering from every corner and keycards that guard the secrets held within its offices like silent sentinels. And you, the new night guard, a position that's just opened up suddenly, with little explanation from the management. You don't mind, though. You appreciate the quiet. Little do you know, the silence here speaks volumes, and tonight, it's going to tell you its story. The evening starts like any other, a round of checks, a cup of coffee, and the soft hum of servers from the data center on the 4th floor. But there's an undercurrent, a feeling you can't quite shake off, like the static before a storm. That's your hook, the whisper of intuition that tells you this shift might just be more than you bargained for. As the city outside dims, cloaked in the velvet of night, the building's artificial day continues, uninterrupted, casting stark white light in harsh lines down empty corridors. You settle into your routine, the monitors before you a window to the vacant eyes of the building. Then, it starts a flicker on the screen. It's the camera feed from the 7th floor, where the legal firms lock away their secrets. You lean in, squinting, but it's gone as quickly as it came. Must be a glitch, you think. These systems are new but not immune to the odd hiccup. You make a note to report it, and that should have been the end of it. But it happens again. And this time, there's no mistaking it for a trick of light or a shadow. There's a figure standing in the hallway, just outside the conference rooms. You bolt upright, grabbing the radio. Static greets you, then silence. The figure's gone now, and everything seems normal. But your heart thumps a wild rhythm against your ribs. You've got to check it out. You patrol the 7th floor, keycard cutting through the silence as doors beep and grant you passage. But there's nothing, no sign anyone was here. The only thing out of place is a cold draft, like a sigh, winding its way through the halls. It's easy to laugh it off, to chalk it up to nerves or an overactive imagination. But deep down, you know it wasn't just your mind playing tricks. The building settled into a stillness that's anything but peaceful. It's waiting, watching, and you can't shake the feeling that your night has only just begun. With each step back to the security hub, the weight of unseen eyes seems to press against you, as if the building itself is alive with whispered secrets. You remind yourself that there's a logical explanation. There has to be. By the light of your monitors, you scour through the camera archives, rewinding the feeds, and searching for the figure. But the playback shows nothing, just the sterile glow of fluorescent lights and empty chairs. It's baffling, frustrating even. You jot down times and camera numbers, the beginnings of an investigation forming. The next day you decide to dig a little deeper. You chat casually with the maintenance crew, probing with questions cloaked in idle conversation. They talk of blown bulbs and unexplained drafts, but nothing substantial. Yet there's a hesitance in their laughter, a glance exchanged, hinting at unvoiced tales. Encounters with a neighborly custodian, who's been tending to this place since it was just blueprints and ambition, proved more fruitful. With the resignation of one who's seen too much, he speaks of the building's history, of the site it was built on, once home to an earlier structure consumed by fire decades ago. Lost were not just files and furniture but lives unaccounted for, their stories ended in ash and smoke. You're not superstitious, but the information plants a seed of unease that takes root in the pit of your stomach. There's a pattern, it seems, to these strange occurrences, and it's tied to the past, a past that clings to the present like a stubborn stain. The building seems to take on a more sinister feel with each passing night. The sterile hallways now feel like they're closing in, and the silence is suffocating, filled with a tension that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. Despite your logical mind, you can't shake the feeling of a presence, as if the shadows are alive and watching. You've started to see the figures more frequently now. Just out of the corner of your eye, they're 1 second, gone the next. Each time you rush to the spot, nothing. But the air feels colder, and the energy shifts. On the monitors, blips of movement vanish when paused. You start taking notes, logging every abnormality. It becomes an obsession. What are you not seeing? In an attempt to dispel the fear, you bring in more light, but bulbs flicker and die within hours. You install a small camera to record your station, hoping to catch whatever might be lurking just beyond your perception. The monitors become a mosaic of angles, but still, you catch only glimpses, and hints of figures that should not be there. One night, the emergency lights flare into life without cause, bathing the corridors in a deep, blood-red hue. Your radio crackles to life, a symphony of static that seems almost like whispering. You respond, but there's no answer, just a crackling laugh of static. This is where you decide to take action. You bring in a friend, a skeptic, someone to validate your experiences or dispel them. He accompanies you on a round, mocking the haunted building. But the smile falters when a door slams shut on its own, and no amount of searching reveals any draft or reason. A tense evening passes, with every sound amplified in the now hostile environment. Then a sharp gasp from your friend as he stares at the monitor. On screen, a clear figure stands in the main lobby, unmoving, facing the camera directly. You both dash to the scene, only to find it empty. The air is icy, breaths materialize in foggy puffs. Returning to the monitors, you rewind the footage, your heart pounding. But the figure is gone from the tape. It was there, you both saw it, yet the recording shows nothing. It defies reason, it defies understanding. As the occurrences escalate, your curiosity evolves into a relentless drive for answers. You begin to research the history of the building, digging through old newspapers and city archives, seeking any explanation for the phenomena you're experiencing. Your search leads you to a series of articles from decades ago. The building, before its current incarnation, experienced a devastating fire. Many were trapped inside, and some did not make it out. The articles mentioned shadows seen in windows by the firefighters, shadows that didn't belong to any survivor. The building was reconstructed, but the past, it seems, was not laid to rest. You delve deeper, uncovering interviews with previous night guards, all of whom left the job abruptly. Their stories echo your experiences, the figures, the malfunctions, the feeling of being watched. One of them mentions a locked room in the basement that no one ever enters, a room kept sealed since the fire. Armed with this new information, you convince the building management to allow you access to the basement room under the pretense of a thorough security check. The door, heavy with disuse, groans open to reveal a space untouched since the tragedy. Charred walls, partially melted items, and in the center, a child's toy that shouldn't have been there, a stark, untouched symbol of innocence among the destruction. As you pick up the toy, a chill runs down your spine. The monitors at your station simultaneously flicker, and for a moment, the figures are back, clearer than ever before, surrounding you. And then, just as suddenly, they dissipate, leaving behind a silence that feels like a breath held too long. It's as if acknowledging the building's painful history, and recognizing the events that transpired, has calmed a restless energy. The nightly disturbances lessen, and though the building never fully relinquishes its eerie ambience, the menacing presence feels diminished. But is this the end, or merely a reprieve? The nights following your discovery in the basement bring a cautious peace, and you begin to hope that perhaps you've appeased whatever remnants of the past lingered in the building. But deep down, a part of you remains vigilant, aware that such things are seldom so easily resolved. Then it happens. One night, when the silence is thick and the monitors flicker in that now familiar way, the figures return. Only this time, they don't vanish. They step out of the screens, their forms more distinct, more human than ever. The air turns icy, and your breath condenses in white clouds as you watch in frozen terror. They move deliberately, each step measured and slow, edging closer to where you sit immobile. Desperate, you scramble for anything that might serve as a weapon, but what use is physical force against apparitions? As they encroach, you find your voice, a mere whisper at first, then stronger, demanding to know what they want. To your astonishment, they halt, and one by one they fade away, leaving behind a single word that hangs heavy in the air. Rest. The revelation hits you with the force of a physical blow. They aren't malevolent spirits. They are echoes of the past, seeking closure. With newfound resolve, you campaign for a memorial to be erected on the building's grounds, a tribute to those lost in the fire. It's a long and arduous process, but you persevere, driven by the conviction that this is the key to laying the restless spirits to rest. As the memorial is unveiled, you stand among the crow. Deep, but your eyes are on the windows of the building. There, just for a moment, you see the figures again, their presence no longer threatening but somehow grateful. The disturbances ceased that night. You continue your work as a security guard, the monitors no longer a source of dread. The building has a different feel now, not quite warm, but no longer cold with unresolved memories. In the aftermath of the memorial's unveiling, a serene calm settles over the once turbulent building. The inexplicable malfunctions cease, and the nightly dance of shadows and figures becomes a memory, a disquieting chapter in your life, yet one that has reached its end. You find solace in the quiet nights that follow, where the only sounds are the distant hum of the city and the gentle whirring of the monitors. Colleagues report a change in the atmosphere. Skeptics are silent, and believers find comfort in the resolution of the building's haunting past. Your actions have not gone unnoticed. Local newspapers hailed the story, a tale of a night guard who went beyond the call of duty to lay bare the building's haunted heart, and heal it. People from all walks of life come to pay their respects at the memorial, and you often find yourself among them, a silent guardian honoring the memory of those who can now rest in peace. In the following weeks, you help organize an annual vigil. The community comes together, sharing stories of the past, both somber and hopeful. It's a tradition that feels like the final stitches in mending the fabric of a once broken history. You notice a change in yourself, too. The fear that once gripped you has subsided, replaced by a sense of purpose. You have become a part of the building's history, a footnote in its legacy, and a catalyst for its reconciliation with the past. As the rhythm of normalcy resumes, the ghostly disturbances that once marked your nights at the commercial building seem like distant whispers from another era. The building breathes with a newfound lightness, free from the shadows that clung to its structure. You often find yourself reflecting on the events that unfolded, musing on the odd serendipity of it all. The fear, the chase, the revelation, all have woven into the fabric of your life, leaving indelible marks on your perception of reality. The building, with its glass and steel, stands resolute against the skyline, but it's no longer just a place of work for you. It's a landmark of a personal journey through the supernatural. But there's a thread, a subtle whisper, that tugs at the back of your mind. In the stillness of the night, when the building is silent, the hairs on your neck stand, a visceral reminder of the eerie presence that once roamed these halls. It's in these quiet moments that you ponder the true extent of the building's secrets. Perhaps the resolution you found was only temporary, a calm in the eye of a perpetual storm. With history so deeply etched into its foundation, can such a place ever be truly free of its past? As you lock up after another uneventful shift, a chill runs down your spine. On the monitor, a fleeting shadow passes, too quick to catch, too real to dismiss as a trick of the light. Your heart skips, but the shadow is gone as soon as it appears, leaving you in the silent, watchful embrace of the building. So, what do you think? If you're enjoying the tale of the night shift, why not give a like and subscribe for more stories? But remember, sometimes the end is just the beginning, and these walls may have more stories to tell. And with that, we leave the story of the night shift for now. The building and its spectral inhabitants rest in the realm of the unknown, where the line between the living and the ethereal remains forever blurred.